All systems go. Clear for liftoff. What's up, everyone? Tyler Tamboline here, aka ToeTagginTambo, back for another edition of Leverage Lane here on the Ship It Nation YouTube station. Got my guy Alex Blickle here with me as always. Going to be breaking down all things Texas Children's Houston Open on the PGA Tour this week. We've got a good one here, the Scotty WD. Congrats to him and his family, baby number 2 coming through. So we've got that. He's out, but his pricing was in, so we'll be talking about that. We're going to teach you how to play, not just who to play, and try and put it all together. We'll have our leverage lane at the end. We'll talk some one and done, have a quick betting segment. And the topic for today, we're going to talk a little bit about when there's a certain course narrative, like this week is, probably heard the word bombers a few times, if not more than that, but we'll talk a little bit about that as well. Alex, I'll bring you in first, man. We'll recap last week a little bit, talk through some weather, course fit, and then get into the topic. But what's going on, my friend? How you doing?
Doing very well in New York City this week, visiting grandparents. So hopefully sirens are to a minimum, and obviously have the old school setup here today. But it's going to be a fun one to talk through. And yeah, there are kind of lots of wrinkles to it. The Scotty wrinkle, as you mentioned, and the fact that everyone's all in on this bomber narrative, and it's largely supported by the data, not just last season where it was softer conditions. So we really saw a boost. Like I think last year we saw driving distance about 250% more predictive than usual, which is just an absolutely massive number. It's not usually that high here, but it is always boosted here. And so we're talking through, do we get different within bombers, or do we go to a different skill set? How do we respond to the field being on the same kind of course fit narrative that we are? It's a fun conversation to have.
Yeah, I think last week a lot of people liked the topic of going through sort of the roster construction stuff. And funny enough, just to not recap the whole thing, we will have a Minwoo conversation this week shortly as well. But just to note it, like Matt Fitzpatrick, almost 30% last week at a $9,800 price tag. He goes out just a week after, coming in second at the Players and gets the job done and wins last week. But the lineup, if you looked at, by the way, shout out to you on the Sungjae call. I was on my boy. I had like 7 or 8%. I didn't get as much as I would have liked, and he didn't come through on Sunday, but Sungjae was looking good through 3 rounds at least, and for his price tag paid off. But if you looked at the winning lineup, again, it just, we talked a lot about skipping the 9s, and I went Hovland and Xander, and Xander came through. But in the end, it was, you could play Matt Fitzpatrick. Funny enough, how could you play Matt Fitzpatrick differently? Don't land in the mid-7s. Well, what it ended up being, it was Xander, Fitzpatrick, and then you had like $7,300, $7K, $7,100 Sungjae, and like a $6,500 Lipsky. Or you could have landed like one more guy down in that lower 7K range, but that would have been a way that you could add lower owned options in the bottom of the 7Ks, still used a popular Fitzpatrick, but then up over the top with Xander mixed in there. So I don't know if you had any follow-up on that, but I thought a lot of people really liked the roster construction conversation that we had there. And then I posted out this article last week, got a lot of action. People loved it. Just the most misunderstood concept. I said, like, this is a big one where people focus so much on these picks and plays and not putting it all together. Again, another puzzle last week that had Fitzpatrick, like most thought, but played in a completely different way than the rest of the field. Any thoughts on that? Just last week's conversation leading into this one.
Yeah, I think one of the really cool thoughts that I had afterwards was just, what would a Xander and Fitzpatrick lineup have looked like, where you would have started in that, really contrarian pairing. Obviously, they both ended up doing quite well with Xander playing super well on Sunday. But would that pairing have worked because of who else you needed to use along with them? And I think that segues pretty well into this week, where it is worth having this conversation of where does the Scotty ownership go? But I think a big point here is there wasn't going to be much Scotty ownership. So I don't think it flows through to the rest of the board now very much, where we're really going to see like a massive change in ownership for anybody. Because when we think about it, like the Scotty ownership itself is going to be distributed pretty evenly through the top of the board, basically like the whole 9K, upper 8K range. They're all getting just a little bit more ownership than they would have. And then where we potentially would have seen the most change is, like, let's say Scotty was 40%. Well, if he was going to be 40%, then okay, there would have had to be at least somebody down in the 6-7K range that was going to be 15% or something like that, because they would have been, in a third of Scotty lineups or something like that. And then that person may have gone from 15% to 5%, or from 15% to, 7 or 8%, something like that. But Scotty wasn't going to be owned enough for that to happen. And so I really don't think anything changes a ton here. And we're pretty much just left with the exact same puzzle, because I think Scotty would have been like 10% owned, certainly the lowest that we had seen this year.
That's what I wanted to clarify too. And I know you were getting there with it. So I'm glad you said that at the end, because if some were wondering, we were never thinking Scotty was going to be owned. That's the whole point. He's basically has turned into now. I think it's been enough people to see it. Mind you, the last few tournaments, you still got him at like 20 plus, but he's kind of turned into the rake now, because people are realizing that even if Scotty wins, and it sounds weird to say, or like whatever people want to call it, they can say what they want. I'm not even shitting on Scotty. Scotty could win a tournament and not be needed the way it's set up right now and the way things have gone. So just noting it, it's like at the end of the day, if he was going to be 10 to 12% or whatever, like people are looking at it like, well, it's almost 15, 17, somewhere in that range. It might just be like the rake. Now that goes away. But for everyone's like, oh, now Min Woo chalk. Hate to tell you this and burst your bubble. Min Woo went from like 32% to 40. It's like he was never going to be 15% or something. It's not like this all just landed on Min Woo. He was already going to be popular because he was almost $5,000 or $4,000 and change cheaper than Scotty. So you got to keep that in mind. This is a good one from Ryan. Blickle has a background every week. The international man of mystery. New York City stand up. So yeah, shout out to everybody here in the chat. We appreciate you guys. Make sure to hit the thumbs up. If you are watching on mobile, just close out the chat with the X in the top right corner, hit the thumbs up quick, and then you can bring it right back up and get in on the conversation. Make sure you're subscribed as we keep moving here towards 12,500 subscribers. Now, we'll answer some of these questions as well, but we'll get to Min Woo, Scotty, weather, everything that we're going to do as usual, the chalk lineup, how to leverage it, betting segment, one and done in our lane. But I wanted to start today with this topic. You and I chatted a little bit on it yesterday, and you brought it up. Is, Newlands is kind of leading us there with a segue. It says bombers that are actually accurate, maybe you can bomb all day and still play bad. I want to ask you, when you have a week so prevalent to one narrative, theme, course, skill set, I should say, actually, or it could be, of course, fit and stuff. We're going to stick to skill set. We're talking about the word bombers, and this has been the thing. We're looking at club head speed. We're looking at all these different factors, driving distance, off the tee, et cetera, et cetera. So everyone's looking at all of that. When you have that, do you have a thought around, sticking with it and just pivoting to different bombers? Or is there, an alternative for you where you say, well, why don't we go playing from the fairway, good with long irons, because that might be the way, or whatever you feel. Obviously, it doesn't mean what's right, wrong, or indifferent. Just kind of getting your thoughts on this as a topic in a whole.
I think it depends on the course fit model. And basically, it depends on what other skill sets are translating to success. So to directly answer this question, I don't think the answer is that you focus on bombers who are also accurate, because accuracy is 50% less predictive than usual here. It's just not a separating skill. And actually, when you look at guys, instead of the less than 50% compared to normal, that's including guys who are missing cuts. And so like one of the things that we have found about the predictive value of accuracy is a lot of the time it's more of like a floor indicator. In other words, being inaccurate hurts players more than it helps the accurate players, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So we already have that asymmetry where it's not a separating skill set. And then that predictive value is even diminished more here. So instead, what we see at this course is a big boost in approach plays predictive value and a big boost in putting's predictive value as well. So all three skill sets, distance, approach play, and putting, matter a lot more than usual. Around the green play is pretty neutral here, and then accuracy off the tee matters a lot less. So one of the ways that we can approach this is we can say, all right, let me find the guys who are long off the tee who are also good either with their irons or putting. And so like maybe you say, I need at least two of those three to be good. The other thing you can do is you can actually look for the guys who aren't long off the tee, but are good with both their approach play and putting. And you basically say, look, there are multiple ways to play well here. It's a lot harder to do if you don't have the distance, but we at least know who's going to be the most capable without the distance. It's the guys who are good with both their irons and putting.
I like that. And I think you could take some other things from it as well. Like I like the point you made about the floor piece. The reason I bring that up is because I think it was the players, right? Like remember Morikawa withdraws after one hole. That's a 43% owned guy. Not to, open up any, wounds that are still there. Hashtag too soon maybe, but just noting it. What happened that week is a bunch of the chalk made the cut, but very few of those were actually needed. Like they all had like mediocre results, but they got through for you. So taking on some of these risks, like somebody said earlier, like Lipsky last week, or think about back to the week too. I'll use Lipsky from last week, but also Nico, the week that he ended up coming out and getting the win. Echeverria, that is, that I'm talking about. There's a different Nico this week that I got interest, as we usually do in Hogard there. But just noting it, this is a setup. These are the guys that you take on for the potential of the upside. The week of, I forget what, I think it was the Players Week as well, like Homa, Brooks, Spieth, JT. Not a lot of love for all of those guys that week. But three of them at least were in the mix at one point. And so it's like, sometimes you are just taking the risk on that because, well, they're not the chalk portion and they may not have the floor those do. It's the ceiling outcome and that opportunity that can lead to the winning lineups. Remember, it's a very ceiling. Think about the prize pool and the way the structure works. Very much ceiling oriented. This building starts with a roof this big and gets skinny at the bottom. Unlike most buildings have a good foundation and then get skinny at the top. You think about the buildings in New York City and places like that. It's like they're not built like that. These buildings are built with very wide top end ceilings. So you got to play for that, and putting some of those guys into your pool is important. You kind of hit on this, so I'm going to rapid fire a couple of these. Will note, though, people got to really pay attention to this, and it's been there, but it's whether or not you're looking or thinking about it this way. It doesn't mean it's right, just noting it. They're putting like 7 to 10 guys at the 7K price points. So you'll have 7 guys at 7K. You'll have 8 more guys at 7,100. Like, it's not really distributing like, Alex had said earlier. If he was going to be 10%, it was just all those guys at the bottom would have been dispersed. You can still play all those guys. What it really does, though, and I wanted to tie it to this and get your thoughts, is the 6K range going to spread out enough that no one breaks 10%? You're saying 6K, Bryant? The truth here is the 7K range. Well, it will have maybe 5 or 6 guys that are double digits. It makes it really hard for the 6Ks to get anything. And the 7Ks still, with, like I said, how many golfers are in the 7K range? It barely gets to 15 on many these days. You might see 1 at 17, 1 at 15, a couple at 12, but it falls off quickly. And remember, 12 is 88 out of 100 aren't playing that golfer. And then you still need to put 5 more golfers into said lineup that we're talking about. So it's like there's a ton of different ways that you can go there. But do you have any thoughts on this question from Bryant?
Yeah, so I think where I'll start is kind of just addressing the first one, which is just like asking about the distribution of Scotty ownership. The first point I'll make here is, and I kind of made this point already, like I don't think a lot has changed based on the fact that Scotty withdrew. I do think the way that the pricing works now has affected ownership, where if DraftKings had priced this contest, this tournament, without Scotty to begin with, we'd see very different prices for some of these players. And that, of course, would affect ownership. And so I think that's something you were kind of touching on there, but yeah. I'll expand on it a little bit, where let's think of last year, like what the pricing was like. I think one of our complaints last year was that it was just way too easy to use him. They did a nice job getting Scotty to a price point that was, that he was worthy of, but they didn't do a good enough job of making that price itself prohibitive, because there were just too many guys who, deserved to be $8,500 that were $7,600 or something like that. And consequently, it was just really easy to build Scotty lineups. And so what they've done this year is they've kind of thinned out that $7,000 range, where they've made like the 7,000 range go up into the 8s, but they've also then brought like the 10 and the 9K guys down a little bit, where it's like they're compressing everything. So like guys who used to be here are now here in price. So there's less of a difference there. And the thing that does is it says not only is Scotty this much more expensive than everybody else, but you also now have a bit of a discount on these other really good players. And it's why we've seen Scotty's ownership kind of consistently come down a little bit and a little bit each tournament, and why it seems like you and I are in agreement that he would have been really low owned this week. And I still don't think I would have had interest, because like, you could build significantly better lineups without him. So even if you said like, I believe that Scotty's going to bounce back, and I think he's still the guy that he was last year, I still don't think he would have been a good play at 14,800 given the pricing of everybody else. And so all of this is essentially to say, I think we were already going to see not a ton of ownership in the 6s and 7s, because this like upper 7K to 10K range is all full of guys that you can make a pretty good argument that they are technically underpriced. And so that's where the field was going to go regardless. That's where the field is going to go now.
Yeah, and I want to add one more point to that. I'm not sure if you were just saying it in a different way, but of note that's important to me at least, and that I think people forget is even at 13-2 and 13-5 that Scotty was last season a lot. People are forgetting that even at one point there was a 5K range involved, and it was not about the ability to play 5K guys because you didn't need them, but it was even worse to what Alex just talked about. You had $8,800 golfers getting pushed down to 7,500. You had $7,900 golfers getting pushed down to 7,100. Well, if you take Scotty at a regular week like this and have around 7,100 left to play, 5 guys, imagine you could play 5 $8,000 golfers last year at that price, but don't then add the fact that Scotty was $1,000 less. So you were actually in like the 8K rate, like upper 7K, mid 7K range, but you had all these 8K golfers pushed down. It made way more sense last year, and that's why people could get away with it more. Hindsight's 2020. We figured out now, not even though on the results of, but Scotty was winning then, and right now he hasn't been. It's not even about that. I'm just talking no results, just process wise. It made, now when you see it, you're like, oh yeah, now he was $1,000 less, and the golfers were all $1,000 less. It's like that just made for the perfect storm of why now we're like, we were probably foolish to fade Scotty ever, if at all, if you did, because you're like, that makes a ton of sense. Even if he didn't fully win back then, that's why you still results where Scotty was finishing 5th and 6th and 8th or whatever it was, and you'd still see him in the mix because you could just get really, really good Scotty lineup. So I think it answers that one quite nicely. Do you have any thoughts on this? Just somebody talking about building a single entry. Obviously, that's your expertise. And you get your 4 guys is kind of what they're saying. And I know we've talked in the past about playing a 3 max like a single entry where you can't really be sure. And instead of playing a $50 single entry, maybe you play a $20 3 max. It's $10 more, but you are able to funnel through a couple different variations on the same core. But if you are down to having a hard time choosing between the safe make the cut guy or the high upside guy, what kind of philosophy do you suggest? And then I will add to it for them, but how much of your process is based on the rest of the lineup? Because I think that also matters as well.
Yeah, it's basically all the rest of the lineup where there isn't a consistent answer here. It's what are you asking of the rest of your lineup? What type of players do you have in the rest of your lineup? So like, let's say, for example, that you start your lineup with, let's go with Ricky Fowler. Okay. If Ricky Fowler is someone that you have conviction on this week, Ricky is somebody who's very valuable from a DFS perspective because of his floor, because you're consistently getting a good chunk of points from him, but he's not someone who's contending very often. He's not somebody who is very likely to win. He's right in the same ballpark as the guys around him in terms of our expected strokes gain projections, and he's at like half the win equity as a lot of the guys around him. So with Fowler, you want somebody who does have that upside, and maybe he does come with some more, miscut risk, but you want that guy who, when he hits, he's going to do really well. Conversely, if you have Sahith Theegala and Wyndham Clark already in your lineup, and you're saying, I know that these guys have a really shaky floor and they can, man, when they play poorly, it looks awful. And I feel like my lineup's dead on Thursday afternoon, but when they play well, they're in 5th place and they're making a ton of birdies. And so maybe they're in 5th place on the actual leaderboard, but they're in 3rd in DraftKings scoring, things of that nature. Those kinds of guys should be paired with a high, made cut equity guy. And you don't really have to worry about the ceiling of that last man in. So very much depends on the lineup. And then I'd also say it depends a little bit on what you're already getting from an ownership perspective. So like, even if you have a really high, win equity player in your lineup, maybe you even have 2. If those guys are chalky, then they're not what we now call separators, right? And so if that's the case, even if they do well, you still need somebody else in your lineup to really help separate you. And if you're not getting that from your other 3, maybe non-chalky guys or non-high win equity guys, then it makes sense for the last guy to be another high upside guy.
Yeah, like that quite a bit. And I figured that's where you'd go with it. I just want to make sure. Answer a couple more quick ones. Just at the Cognizant, Ryan, we just had this, it kind of turned into that. As Alex said, a lot would have changed if the pricing wasn't done before the Scotty WD, because then you would have had the Minwoo would have been 10-8 or 10-5 or something. It would have changed up kind of everything, but just got to note that. But now you can kind of play it like that week. It doesn't mean it's going to work out the same way, but I think that's a conversation for another minute or two. Dennis, we appreciate you being here, man. Every week, 10:30 a.m. Eastern, which I think is 9:30 CST, but I'm not the best with time zones, and I'm in one that doesn't even exist in the United States. So I'm not the best to help you with that there. Jason talks about, not much of a penalty, missing the fairway. We'll talk about that when we start going through what people are landing on. One thing I'll say about this, I know Stat, you brought up yesterday in the Discord as well. There is some, again, if you have like an MME approach, which is my side of things here on this show, I definitely think that's a great call out. And obviously anything you can do in that, you can do in single entry. I'm just saying what becomes challenging, almost like when people go Scotty, is what I always call a Yahtzee Scheffler. You're just counting Scotty as the high score. And I know you're not talking about Scotty. I'm combining two things here. But when you count Scotty, you got to roll the other 5 perfect dice. And it's like, oh, I rolled 4, but I didn't roll Lipsky in my dice. Let's use like a regular week where, like last week, if you needed Lipsky, Scotty wasn't there. But just to note, it's like it's same thing here. If you do lean into the 6K guys and you only have one lineup, the minute you get like one thing wrong, and I know people say, well, that's the same for everything. It's not necessarily, you can get, like Alex just said, especially in higher dollar single entry stuff too, you could still play like a really good lineup, like I've showed off on the show multiple times, winning me big tickets and things like that, and still get pretty good scores out of them, where it is a bit of a safer approach, but it's like nobody over 15, nobody under 8. You're all talking about these guys. You just didn't find this construction to put them all together this way. And I'm not worried about being duped or anything like that. So I think it is definitely a way to go this week, but definitely think something to consider. All this stuff is built into the projections, right? So when you account for this type of stuff, it's all built in the back end, part of the formulas that we put together. And I'm sure it's the same for Alex. And I think that's kind of the majority, but yeah, like Toasty is the conversation. Jesper, he had them there listed at the bottom. Yeah, those two might get to 5 to 8. Again, in a vacuum, horrible. Because if it was a matchup play and like one guy's 0.5% and Toasty's 8%, then yeah, you want the 0.5. Now you can add that to your full lineup conversation, but I get it. But it's more so the overall conversation to me, Alex, of like, why is Toasty popular? He's coming off 7 missed cuts, but wait, then he came 30th in, what was that, Puerto Rico?
Something like that, yeah.
What did he play in? Like what's his? Anyway, it might even have been better than that. But my point is, like, people track this stuff. It might have been at the Houston Open just passed, right?
Yeah. The other way that I'll answer this question is that it shows up a lot in ceiling projections, at least for us over at FTN, where like these guys who make a ton of birdies, they're still going to have events where they don't make birdies. I think that should be pretty intuitive, but like essentially what you're saying is, no matter how well or poorly this guy plays, we expect him to make a little bit more birdies than you would expect given his actual performance. But if his actual performance is bad, you're still expecting very, very, very few birdies. And so it doesn't really affect the floor a whole lot. But what you're also saying is when this guy plays well, he's not going to be playing really well because he's doing a great job of avoiding bogeys. He's going to play well because he is scoring. He's converting all the par fives. He's maybe getting an eagle or two, something like that. And the other thing is the more birdies you're making, the higher your odds of a streak are and things of that nature. And so it shows up a lot in ceiling projections. So for example, like I'm staring at, Michael Thorbjornsen versus Shane Lowry. They're almost identical in our projected points, but Thorbjornsen's almost 4 points ahead of Lowry in our ceiling projection. And so you really see it separate in that regard. Both of these guys, high volatility players. So the ceiling is there in that regard, but Lowry slightly negative birdie rate over expectation. Thorbjornsen has one of the best at plus 2.2%.
Yeah, and Brian, I know this. This is what I'm saying. This is what the bubble exists, though, when people are talking about picks and plays all day instead of actually digging into stuff. Like, this is my whole point. I literally don't care what he did last year and the year before here. It has nothing to do with it. And everyone just leaning on last week because he's cheap and a bomber. He's probably got the safety to make the cut here. Like it's Toasty. He bombs it. I get it. He's done well here in the past. But the last week at the Valspar, the 30th, just dig in. It's the only tournament he's even made the cut in his last like 10 events. Okay, what happened? Round 1, par, and lost almost a stroke. Where was it? He gained almost a stroke putting. Round 2, he sneaks in to make the cut, gaining almost 3 strokes with the putter. This is not even his game. That's just, that's part of it. If it happens, it happens. He gets hot. Round 3, he lost stats across the board, except for off the tee, which is what you expect him, but literally did nothing, lost over a stroke entirely across the board, and then had a pretty decent round 4, but it was actually not the best off the tee. So it's like all this stuff is random. What we're trying to say is off of one event. It doesn't, like, that's where I'm saying it runs me into more trouble than like trusting a guy up top, where it's like the 30 to 40% guy up top is probably going to make the cut and then get through for you. It's just then how do they compare against those around him? We saw it a couple of weeks ago with outside of the WD on Morikawa, but Morikawa and Siwoo, you could just play Xander and Hideki in between. And maybe Morikawa, if he had been healthy, comes through and does really well, and that changes that too. But it's kind of just pointing out of where you can make these choices. All I'm saying is I'd be less likely to do this down low, banking on, but Toasty did well here the last 2 years and played good last week one time, when you have literally 40, 50 golfers within $300 of either way, and you can easily find a different lineup. Could Toasty still do it? Absolutely, he can. So think about that when you're building your lineup. But this is not the reason to lean on him. Yeah. That's just the excuse of why you are leaning on him.
The nice thing about Toasty is we at least have seen that, like, this is his style of course. When distance matters a lot more than accuracy, that's when we've seen him do well. He also finished 10th in Mexico last year. But also true last year is that his approach play was actually pretty good leading into this event. It was pretty good at Mexico, and it was even good at the Players when he didn't drive the ball well, so he missed the cut there last year. But he was great here last year because his approach play was great. He gained over a stroke per round. His approach play has been atrocious this year. So he goes from someone who last year was probably projecting pretty well in our stuff because distance and approach play, that's what he does, or that's what he was doing last year. So he was going to project well. This year he projects horribly because, yeah, the distance is there, but the approach play is awful, and approach play is even more predictive relative to baseline than distance is here. So yeah, I have no interest in Toasty, and not because of some kind of ownership thing. It's not like he's going to be anywhere near popular enough where you have to fade him based on ownership, just because distance is not all that matters here. You still have to be a good golfer. And right now, he's just not that.
Yeah. And there's so many other, like, I would honestly rather play your boy Jesper than him for a little bit more. And he's with talking just guys that have ownership, like still. Then there's like 40 names, like I said, legit 40 names, to Ryan's point there, of all around him that you can roll into. But all my point was, I do believe data is super important in golf. It literally, it can push you in the right directions. I understand that the club head speed and the driving distance and the course fit, like all that stuff would lead to him. I'm saying you still have to then consider the 8% ownership, if that's what it ends up being, or 5%, or whatever it ends up, probably comes in at like 5 or 6 realistically. But my point being, it's not saying I wouldn't play him. I'm saying I'd be very cognizant of, when I do play him, what the rest of my lineup looks like. Because if you're just going to plug him in with Minwoo and Goddard and Knapp and whoever else, and Gerard and all the chalk, which we're about to get to, it'll be a good segue, then that makes your lineups not really look up as good, right? And I think this is just, Jam Eagle says this, and people are talking about Meisner, Mao, these types of guys. Anyone else not talk about it? No matter who talks about these guys, outside of like Svensson and Toasty, I don't think any of them will get ownership. So literally just play whoever you want and build your lineup accordingly with what you've got in there, because the result will matter in the end, but we don't know the result going in. So we're working fully off of process, and that's the key to the show and what we go through. So do you want to tie that quickly to Minwoo? I just think there's an interesting conversation around that, and that's a good starting point for this. Then we can talk some weather and anything else. I think course fit has been kind of hammered through, but like the Minwoo factor, like I was trying to say earlier, he was going to be owned anyway. He was 40-1 here last year when he won. Like, it wasn't like he was some shocker or surprise. I mean, he wasn't 10-1 like he is now, but that's Scotty related. I think he was 19 when it opened up. It was like, so it's all baked in. But a lot of people like heard me mention yesterday. I said in my Discord over at Chip Nation, I said, man, it was some interesting comments. It was like people were talking about Lowry at the Cognizant, where it was this type of setup of a $9,900 golfer and then nobody down below. And, he got to 40%. Gerard got to 40, or it was 41 for Lowry and 40 for Gerard, and Hogard was 30 and stuff like that. But like Minwoo coming in, I'm the opposite of what I just said about the Toasty thing. Like I legit, I say I'm the same on it. I should say, like I'm more on the opposite side of it. I don't care that he won here last year. I think it's more impressive the 2nd, the 12th, the 6th, the results he's putting up in the field strengths he's been in of these signature events and things, and now coming in here and getting a field like this to himself, where, yeah, people say that it is a little bit stronger for sure. If you look up the numbers, it's a little bit stronger on paper too. But I'm just saying you can build lineups with Minwoo this week and get different elsewhere. It's definitely still a possibility. Plenty of ways actually you can go with building with him.
Minwoo to me is all about whether you're buying the approach improvement or not, because it's only 6 events so far this year, one of which we didn't even have shot link data for 2 of his rounds at the Amex. So he's gained in 4 of the 6 events with his approach play. He's gained significantly in 2 of the 6. He's lost pretty significantly in 2 of the 6. Are you buying the improvement, or are you saying this is a 6-event sample? It's not even like he's been consistently great. He's had 2 really bad events with the approach play. He's just spiked twice, and that's why it looks good. And we've seen him spike in the past, and then it goes from, a full stroke gained per round to a full stroke lost per round in the next event and the next 3 events, things of that nature. And so whether or not you're playing Minwoo, I think just all comes down to your belief in the approach play improvement. If you're all in on the approach play improvement and you think this is the new Minwoo, he's actually going to gain quite frequently, then he's not bad chalk at that number. It doesn't mean you have to play him. Like, I wouldn't say that makes him a core play or a priority by any means. But if you're at all hesitant on the approach play, if you're all skeptical, then I think he's a pretty easy fade. And that's the category that I'm in.
Yeah, the bigger thing too is also what's around him that you can still go to. I'm just saying, again, another point, like the other side, like don't be shocked if he comes through. It's like people get so mad if he comes through. It's like you watched Lowry almost win at that ownership. You watched 30% Fitz win last week. Like, it wouldn't shock me if he does come through. I don't think it'll be because he won here last year. It will end up being, like you said, probably because he still does bomb it off the tee and can do that. But his approach play has been better. It was mediocre last event out, and he was still in the mix. But the events before that, like the API and Pebble, it was dialed in, and everything else was too. And obviously those result in like 2nd and 6th place. If that happens, you're going to be in pretty good shape. But I think the other thing around him is like, Goddard. If you're just going to God, you're just at that. To me, when someone's like, oh, I'd rather have Goddard, then do that, or play them both, or whatever you decide. But my point being, you're not like getting some ownership discount, really. Like, it looks like both them in high stakes could be 25 to 35 range, and I'm putting a wider range on just to say it's somewhere in that middle ground. So it's kind of like pick your poison at that point. So, well, Goddard wins more. Goddard's won more recently. It's that all those factors are true, and if that's what you like, I would roll with it. But then you also have Sam Burns right below it. You've got the Brooks Koepka factor, where what I mean by that, the Brooks Koepka factor, is the median projection is not going to show up. When we talked earlier about safe versus the upside, one thing about Brooks, the only thing that's really been off for him these last is the driver. And the thing that you can be off with a little bit more here is the driver, the way it sets up. So maybe that's better for him. And he comes through at 9,600 where he just can't be owned, right? You've got Jake Knapp, you've got Goddard, you got Lee. So you've got Burns and Koepka kind of squeezed in between that I think are pretty interesting if you're going into that 9K range there as well. Anything else you want to talk about on this current topic? If not, let's talk a little, just anything you see with the weather or anything more you want to add with course fit, and then we'll go into the chalk build.
It does look like we might get a wave advantage this week. It depends on the weather model that you're looking at, but it seems like the windiest conditions are going to be tomorrow afternoon, so Thursday afternoon. And then it seems like Thursday or Friday afternoon might actually be a little bit calmer than Friday morning. And so we might get the peak winds on the PM AM wave and the lightest winds on the AM PM wave. So if we get kind of that double duty, if you will, then we get a really nice wave advantage for the AM PM group. So that currently is very much on my mind, and in our ownership over at FTN, I do have that factored in a little bit, where I do anticipate the field having a preference for that wave, but it doesn't look like it's going to be, anything remotely close to even what we had at Sawgrass, where, 13% of lineups were heavier on one of the waves and something like 60% was heavier on the other wave. I think it was even more. I think it was like 67% was heavier on the one wave. So I don't think we'll see anything close to that. And that means that if you want to go in on this wave stack, I think it's a very viable path this week.
Yeah, and it's funny when people do it on the weeks when everyone's talking about it, and they don't do it on the weeks. And I've done it forever, so it's been a part of my success in the PGA DFS streets. Has certainly just been doing that, or if it just lands that way. And I think that can be like tiebreakers and stuff as well. We've had these conversations on previous shows. I think it was 2 weeks ago we had this conversation, the big wave advantage one. So if you want to go back and check that out, you guys can. It's just the first part. The timestamps will be there. Just look up Leverage Lane on the Ship It Nation YouTube channel. But if you see that, I usually like it when it's PM AM. Just naturally, I think about the mental state of a golfer, which again, it's not like I could get into that mind. I know you could personally, being a pro yourself, but like I think it's when you got to go out on you have a decent Thursday afternoon or good enough, and you got to go out Friday morning and just set the tone. It's like, look, I don't have to chase a number. I don't know what I need to be at exactly. I kind of have an idea, and let me go set the tone and see what happens versus, oh shit, I need to get to 3 under and I got 5 holes left. pressure. It's golf. Anything can happen, right? It's a mind game. So I think that's something to think about. But I usually like it when it's that way. If it is AM, PM, and you're looking at your lineups and you are going that route anyway, I got no problem finishing out your build that way if you land there. All right. So with all that said, let's go look at the chalk build and see what you think. I think the setup looks pretty straightforward, at least somewhat, but what are you seeing and thinking off the top? What's your first thoughts on what the chalk build looks like?
We just have so much chalk in the 9K range that I think what we'll see is either one of Minwoo and Goddard and then one of Knapp, Fowler, Kitayama, Nikolai, or we might see people try to get three of that second group where it's a more balanced lineup and it's, three of Knapp, Fowler, Kitayama, Højgaard, or maybe they can't do that. So it's two of those guys and then one of like Griffin, Thorbjornsen, Gerard, that group. But we're obviously locked into balanced builds because you can't spend on anybody over $10,000. So it's a little pointless to say we're going to see a lot of balanced builds this week, but I think we're going to see a lot of lineups that bottom out in the 7K range and maybe only have one or two guys in that range, and they just hammer the 8 and 9K range because they're as we talked about, like there are so many guys in this 8 to 9K range who, if this tournament was priced without Scotty involved, they'd all be $500 to $1,000 more. Like we'd see, Minwoo Lee would be 10.5 minimum or something like that. We'd see Ben Griffin would probably be like 92, 93. We'd see Thorbjornsen at 90 or 91, something like that. And so all of these guys are really compressed because of Scotty, and it's just going to make it a lot easier to kind of jam pack them all together.
Yeah, this question came up because I just asked it, but I'm curious. Yeah, what is your take on it? And I don't know, like if I fully agree with new ones anyway. Not that there's something to agree with here, just noting like to me, when you start in the PM on Thursday, I don't really feel like you're chasing a leader, even though factually you are. But it's like when we think about it, it's DFS related. So it's always about like you got to make the cut for anything to matter. So I always feel like the PM AM guy is the one that sets the tone. And it's actually the AM PM guy that now knows when he goes out on Friday, I have to basically hit a number to even have a chance to worry about a leaderboard on the weekend. But what's your thoughts on it? I'm curious now that we got you here.
I like the late early more than the early late, but not for the reasons that have been discussed. I don't think it's about when you're on the course and tracking down the cut line, because for one thing, even when you're playing in the morning, you have a very good sense of what the cut's going to be. So and if the whole idea is that it might be a little bit harder to play well when you're under the pressure of making the cut, like you get that in the morning too. You get it just as much because
Sure.
know you're at least around the cut. Where I think it's a lot favorable, and I think most guys would agree with this, is that it's just the shorter turnaround. Like it's not an issue on Thursday morning to have to wait till the afternoon to tee off because the tournament hasn't started yet. It's really nice to then play, go get dinner, sleep, wake up, and play. You stay in rhythm. You don't have to think about your round too very much. When you play early Thursday, then you have to figure out what to do with the rest of your day. Then you sleep, wake up in the morning, figure out what the hell to do in the morning. Because the thing is, for all of Thursday afternoon and evening and then Friday morning, your mind can't leave the fact that you're in a golf tournament and that you have to, perform the next day. And so that's what's on your mind. It's not like you can just go have a really fun day and not think about it and then, refocus the next day once it's time to. That's on your mind the whole time. Just like anything in life that you're stressed about is always constantly there on your mind. And so that just becomes a little bit tiresome. And then the other point is, like, if you played really well on Thursday morning, you want to get right back out there. And similar, actually, if you play poorly, you want to immediately go change that mojo, play well, and you just have to wait so long. It almost feels like you took, a full day off by the time you're back on the course Friday afternoon. So I prefer late early, but it's for a different reason.
And I also think too that I've always thought about this as well. Again, I don't know anything about this. I just think it's the way I think about it and would think about it. It's like you also, when you start PM on Thursday, you get to see how the course plays in the morning to know how to play in the afternoon. Again, doesn't mean it'll be that way, but even when you play the next morning, you've also seen how it's played if the conditions are similar, using a week like that, where it's kind of a better thing for you. So it's kind of like you have more information as well. And then you just go and do it. Like you said, it's play, eat, sleep, eat, play, or whatever that looks like, and move on. It's like you get to kind of roll through with all that momentum. So the chat's talking about it. I mean, I could see where it's like a Min Woo, and then maybe people do go to like a Thor with Gerard or something. But I guess I do think more will start with 2 9Ks. So if you think that, do you think it's Knapp or Kitayama that gets more love as the second guy in, or do you think it's all the way up to Goddard just because they're both so popular that they'll become popular as a combo?
I mean, I've got all of Knapp, Fowler, Kitayama, Nikolai, all 20 plus in single entry, and between 22 and 26%. I think Nikolai might actually be the most popular of that group, but we're splitting hairs here. I mean, they're all going to be popular. They're all going to be in a lot of different lineups. The one that I wouldn't be shocked if he slipped through the cracks would be Ricky, and then the other one would potentially be either Brooks or Knapp, just because if people really get in on the wave stack idea that, hey, you know what, there is going to be an advantage for the AM PM group, then Knapp and Brooks could slip through the cracks. But again, like I think Brooks certainly has a chance to be fairly low. Knapp, Fowler,
I'll chime in on that quickly just to say that I don't believe any Brooks ownership right now anyway, because the projected, again, we live in a bubble. You will hear more people talking about him this week. You will actually hear more people betting him this week, and that's because the odds are all related to that, and for good reason. Like if he's going to win, let's just have the betting rights, betting outright on him. But also, it's like people have already bet him for the Masters. People have already got ahead on all the majors. People were betting him last week, so it's like that's the difference. Where that's and then don't forget, some people then rely on that to say, okay, I've already bet this guy, don't need to play him in DFS, or I'm going to move to this instead. So I could definitely, I don't see anywhere where he actually gets the ownership, because I just think it has to go to Minwoo, Goddard, Knapp. And even if Knapp comes down, I think it leads more to Nikolai and Kitayama, and those are like whoever projects the best. So yeah, I don't see that. And I actually think Burns could be a little bit overlooked as well. So I guess like I wouldn't hate starting lineup with Burns, or even like a Goddard Burns if you wanted to, or something like that. But that's another unique way to go this week. I think that would be different.
Yeah, one of the things I will say about this week is, because ownership's so kind of condensed up top and there are so many guys who are popular, there is higher than usual risk of guys who are projected at least comparatively low ownership to the guys around them, of them steaming like crazy, because anybody who's looking at the top of the board is going to say, oh, if I want to get contrarian up here, I'm either using Sam Burns or Brooks Koepka. So if enough people just make the decision that they want to get contrarian, there are only 2 guys they can go to. So both of those guys have a chance of coming in a lot higher than we are currently estimating. And I think it could happen to both of those guys, but I'm really worried that it's going to happen to Burns, where we all think we're getting Burns 15, 17%, something like that. And he ends up 25 to 30 just because everyone had the exact same thought. So that's definitely something to watch out for this week.
Yeah, I'm just trying to see if there's one more version of it I can find, and I can't. Man, it is tricky. Like it makes me wonder about like if do you think there's any possibility that Minwoo ends up coming like 3rd highest owned, because of like people do land on like the Naps or the Nikolais or something like in the 8K, like meaning that they'll just help boost it some. Because if you build like a Jaeger, Fox, Thigala, like do a bottom up build here of like, okay, who are kind of the popular 7K guys, and then you go to like a mid range in Gerard or whoever, like you still kind of land on like, you could get like Knapp, Hogard, and Gerard, for example. Here's an example. You could get Knapp, Hogard, Nikolai, that is, Gerard, and then that would get you Thigala, Jaeger, Fox.
Yeah.
And yes, there's variations of this, certainly. I'm just saying, like, if your Fox is a 7K guy, then yes, you can immediately move from Knapp up to Minwoo. And I guess that's kind of the thought process. Who's your most popular guy? If I take out Fox and Knapp, I think Thigala and Jaeger will definitely be popular. In the 7.1 range of like Bez and who else is down here? Like, man, not many people.
It's Yellow Mirage at 7,200.
And I just can't quite fit them. That's what I was trying to get to. $100 off.
I mean, beyond that, there's no one over 5% for us in single entries.
So there you go. Like even then, Minwoo becomes Goddard in that example. But you could have Goddard, Nikolai, and then you'd get Gerard, Thigala, or Jaeger, Thigala, and Yella. And that kind of rounds it out. So I guess my point would be too. And then I guess the other thing about that is, if the tea time thing does become talked about a little bit more, I could see where this all pulls Minwoo down just a little bit. I'm saying, and it's like, okay, then people will settle on stuff below. Plus, there's going to be people that just hate Minwoo at an ownership. Like I said already, there's people like, that's stupid. It's only because of this. I get all that. So like, to me, I could definitely see where these end up the builds. So let's just say that there's multiple variations. If it's Minwoo for you, you can obviously find $100. I'm just using this with Goddard. I'm just saying you can get a Goddard, Nikolai with Gerard, Jaeger, Thigala, Yella, whatever you disagree with us on in this example. And I'm putting us in the bucket here just to make time fly, but I'm saying like whatever you disagree with, you can obviously find it. What we're seeing though is probably 2 9Ks with 3 7Ks is kind of popular. And maybe there's a 2 8K version where people switch it up, right? Whoever that is, they go to, and you end up with that. But I do think this is going to be a little bit more popular that we see this, right?
Yeah. And to your point, so I think number one, to answer your question, yes, I think there's absolutely a chance that Minwoo ends up like only the third highest owned guy. And to that point, we only have him at 31.4% in single entry. You talked earlier about the fact that like he might go from 30 to 40 because of Scotty. We don't have him projected to do anywhere close to that. I think for us, he went from 30.6% to 31.4% in single entries. So really small piece of the pie. And part of that is
sorry, I was talking high stakes too, just to note, like I think we have him at 28 right now in the lottery, but it's like, I don't know what, I mean, I'm sure he's over 30 when it comes to high stakes or like the satellites and the big time stuff like that. So it's really just where does he actually end up? Now I'm starting to think it does stay lower 30s, even in that stuff. And it could come down to like the 25 range, 28 range, somewhere in there for the lotteries and stuff, just because there's so many other ways you can go.
And to your point, we have him at 32.2% in our new high stakes ownership. And part of that is because I'm already projecting a little bit of a field preference towards the other wave that he's not a part of. And so if the field gravitates towards that route even more, then that 31 and 32% in single entry and high stakes could end up, 25 and 25, or maybe even 20 in one of them. And that's one of the things that like, we'll see that effect more prevalent in high stakes than single entry, because the high stakes players are more likely to take these, advanced DFS strategies. Not that stacking is that an advanced of a strategy, but they're more likely to take a DFS strategy approach than a picking their favorite players approach. And so wave stacking obviously falls under that umbrella. And so maybe we'll see a much lower owned Minwoo than the field is currently expecting. And again, that wouldn't necessarily mean that I want to play him, just because he's still going to be somewhat owned. And as you mentioned, like he very much profiles as one of those guys that you play him when he's contrarian, not when he's chalky, because of how volatile he is.
Yeah, and Timmy just brought it up. I think Fox will be more popular than Jordan Smith at 7,400. But if you just pick your poison there, whatever you want to do, my takeaway would be that lineup. So you can get Minwoo Lee, Jake Knapp. It still fits the same thing we said. 2 9s, 3 7s is going to be very popular, because you have Minwoo, Jake Knapp, then you go to Gerard, and then it's Thigala, Fox, and Yella. And that would round it out as well. So, I mean, either way, you can see what's happening here is 1 to 2 8K guys. I'll talk more when I get to my lane later, which people could probably pick apart, but it's not just for that reason. I just want to note it for other reasons when we get there. But there's definitely ways to leverage this. And I think, just one of the key things too is when there's so many 9K guys, people do a lot of decision making. Like, it has to be Goddard. We've talked about this plenty in the past. It's got to be Goddard versus Lee. There's not a matchup bet here. Like, you're building a lineup that you can put 6 guys into. Of course, there is salary constraints, so you have to consider that. But it could be Minwoo, Knapp, and then you land with 7.7. We just saw how that played out. Well, what if you add, I don't know, let's see what we can do here. Ricky, and then you go to like Ben Griffin. Well, that's 6.2K. Maybe that's not good enough. All right, let's go down. Let's go to Sam Stevens. Well, now you have 6.7K left to round it out. You've got an upper 7K guy where most aren't landing. If they are, they're landing on Jaeger, who's 78. You have someone who's not him. And then you still have 2 guys in the upper 6K range that if you found something there, you could get there. But just noting it from that perspective. And Coach, you've been with me a very long time. We never say who we're doing what with. Like, it's at the end of the day, I'm going to talk about Toasty. And I'm sure in MME, in my 150 set, he'll end up in Toasty lineups, meaning there'll be ones that I build accordingly. But there's no specific mention to it, because it's like all just what can you do? You pick your lane, right? You decide. So that would be the build, Alex. So any other ways you can think to leverage it in a single entry perspective that you want to bring up? And then if you hit my lane, it's fine. I already know what I like anyway. So it's going to be pretty clear cut for me this week.
Well, I'll add something else instead. And that is there's a group of guys, Knapp, Thor Bjornsson, and Cootie, whose ownership is all really, really tied to what the field decides to do with the waves, because they're all in this quote unquote wrong wave. And so if the field is not, if the field doesn't care about the wave that in the way that I currently expect them to, all of those guys are going to end up a lot more popular than I currently have them projected. And they all could end up being amongst the most popular on the slate. Minwoo is also in that group as well. So, we could end up seeing a 40% Minwoo, a 30% Nap, a 25% Thor Bjornsson, and a 20% Cootie, for example, if I'm wrong about the wave currently. And so, and the other thing there is, like, I'm phrasing it as me being wrong currently, but I might change what I'm expecting from the field tonight if the forecasts change. And so, by tonight, I might have all those guys projected where I just mentioned. And so that's very much something to look for. And that would change the common build, because if all of a sudden Cootie and Thor Bjornsson are really, really popular plays, those guys are even easier to fit than some of the guys that we were talking about earlier, like the Nikolai and Kitayama and Fowler grouping. So that would make it even easier for people to then just kind of cram as many guys in the 8 to 9K range as they possibly can.
Yeah. And I'll definitely be talking about the 6K range more in a second when I get there. So, definitely that. And again, because it's not, again, this is what we say all the time, Andrew, is like, it's people talk a lot of shit. They're not about it. You go to a game when somebody's talking shit to you at the sports place that you're at, and they start talking shit, and then see if a fight actually happens. It doesn't often happen. It's a lot of talk. So just keep that in mind. In DFS, there's a lot of people talking about a lot of things. Not a lot of people actually execute or action them. Some people actually talk about DFS and don't even play. So, keep watching those shows too while you're at it. But just noting it, I think it's important to remember it's not always just that narrative. It's, in this case, people would look at it as a price play, right? $8,400 for Gerard. He's the average price. Basically, he fits any style of build. That's where people feel safer, because they should. He's probably way more. I got it up here now. I can pull it up. Just let me see. If we go to Gerard, he's the highest odds to make the cut. We actually have him higher odds to make the cut than pretty much anyone up to the 9K range, right? Like right there. Like he's for making the cut. What he actually ends up doing and what the results because of that, if he's needed, all of those factors. That's a prime example of somebody earlier where we talked about the example of like the safety versus the ceiling. It's like people will definitely take him for the safety play because he feels a lot better than clicking Wyndham Clark right there. But what can Wyndham Clark do if it's a Wyndham Clark week and he's actually on? Well, the sky's the limit, right? You'd have to wait and see. So that's kind of the thought process there. The Rasmuses, the Keith Mitchells, all that. And by the way, the ownership's not like super high on Gerard right now. And we just showed you how he doesn't even really, he fits those builds exact. But after that, it's not like people are using him a ton. So I think that's something to consider as well. Anything else you want to talk about with how to leverage it? If not, I do want to talk a little bit about one and done this week. I think, we've had some good conversations around it in the past, but anything else from the DFS perspective that you wanted to bring up here?
No, my leverage lane is going to be how to leverage it. So we don't need to talk more about that.
All right, let's talk about one and done. One thing I'm really realizing, and that's like the kind of thought process back, it kind of does tie in what almost became our topic today of like safety versus, what people are talking about, what others are doing and all that. And I know you've talked about it in the past. I'm certain that the Bombers are going to be popular in one and done this week because it's been talked about a ton and it just makes sense. We get it. We've explained that and, beat the horse to death, if you will. But just to note it, these events that don't have the big paydays, it kind of does pay to just collect the money and move on, right? Like we saw it. I'm not sure if I fully went into it last week. I can't remember or not, but I even sent it to my dad to show him. And I thought it was really interesting is like the winner of the one and dones the last couple of years. It's like, it's all just tied to signature events, right? Mm-hmm. It's you got to hit those. And you could be the winner last year in the big one on Splash had like nobody had $1 million or less in the first 8 to 10 events. Like by players, they didn't even have $1 million yet or just over. Then won 5 signature events and picked up another 1.2 or 1.5 down the stretch across some of the weaker tournaments. Didn't even have the strong finish at the big tournament, like the big tournaments at the end, and still won the whole thing by 2.5 million. So at these events, I do think there is some like collect and go, but then factoring in the things you always talk about of, okay, but will you get, I don't know, like Minwoo's a good example. Where else are you using Minwoo? I get he's going to be super popular this week, but where else are you using Minwoo? And on top of it, it's like, even if he doesn't win, but he collects you 200 grand or something like that might be better than your off the wall pick. Now it matters a little bit where you stand currently, all of that, but what are your one and done thoughts this week? I'm always curious to hear those.
Yeah, I think I'm with you in the sense that I care a little bit less about the ownership of the play this week and much more about, am I going to want this player at some elevated event later in the year instead of having used him this week? And so that latter variable is what's going to keep me off players more than high expected ownership. But I also think that, some of the most popular players this week, I don't really want to use them. So like Minwoo Lee, for example, I think he's going to be so overowned that I just don't have interest because I don't think he's that much more likely to win or more likely at all than some of the guys that I can get at much lower ownership. And I do think the kind of corollary to that is it's probably a good idea to try and find a really good player who isn't a bomber this week and just use him. So maybe it's Fowler, maybe it's Harris English or somebody along those lines where you're just saying this guy competes and contends because he's a very good golfer, despite the fact that he's not super long off the tee, because ownership is going to be driven by distance for sure here in one and done.
Do we still, I can't remember, we used Fowler that week or not in ours. Did we?
Let me see. Do we have?
It's funny you brought him up. I was definitely, a little bit interested in Fowler here just for, a few reasons, like you said earlier, but just, just looking at it from the perspective of playing okay right now. I think he's very capable here. You talk about his tee time, like anything you want to roll with. There's a lot of different angles to pursue, but also just so close to the Masters. I think Ricky needs a top 20 here or better this week to be able to get into the Masters. And I think he's trending in the right direction. So it's like, I feel like everything he's done lately, he can still set up well for this course. Yeah.
We did use him at the Amex, so we can't use him unfortunately, but maybe English, maybe Shane Lowry. I'm not going to want Shane Lowry at a signature. I can tell you that much. He doesn't have the stones, it seems. So beyond that, man.
What about Adam Scott? The chat said Adam Scott is my one and done pick. Shouldn't be super popular, and the man has super strength at his age. I always said this about Adam Scott. I've kind of like soured on him a little, but I guess at this event. But in these like weaker field events, again, I know we know all the names and whatnot, but like in general, overall weaker field, that's when he seems to pop the most. Because like they forget that, yes, he comes 40th in all these tournaments, but and now even worse, but it's because he's playing against the best in the world where there's like 20 names right off the hop that he can't compete with. So when else are you playing Adam Scott?
I love Adam Scott this week. And I can't figure out why he's not popular, because he's a bomber off the tee now. Like, I mean, his ball speed is just incredible for his age, but it's great regardless. Like, you don't even need the qualifier for his age to be really impressed with his distance now. And the approach play has been unbelievably good. He's gained 0.6, 0.8, 0.6, 1.1, and 1.8 strokes per round in every event this year with his irons. How is this not one of the industry's favorite plays of the week? I don't get it, but it makes him a target for me in DFS. And the one thing I'll say about him as well, this is kind of an extension of just betting thoughts, if you will. If you want any hope of betting him at a good number at Augusta, you probably have like a week and a half to do that, because as soon as we get to Masters week, especially if he continues to play like this, the number's going to crater. 90-1 is available right now at BetMGM, and he's going to be like 40 the week of if he continues to play like this.
What about a Blickle beatdown real quick? What about when someone says this? Scott's off the tee stats are horrible. What do you say to that?
Which Scott? Adam Scott?
Yeah.
The guy who he was bad at the Players. He lost 0.8, but he gained 0.85, 1.05, 1.1, and 0.95 at the Sony, Amex, Farmers Insurance, and Genesis. He's been really good off the tee. Like, I don't know what that's referencing. So.
Blickle on Blevins violence. He got him in the chat. Sorry, guys. I had to have a little fun with it down the stretch. We love Jason. We appreciate him being here, always interacting. But like, again, even when you see that, I always just go with a grain of salt, but it's like, that's the Toasty example from earlier. Oh, but he played good last week. Did he? Did you even look in, or did you just see 30th on the sheet and say, well, he had a good result? That's what I'm trying. It's DFS related too. You know how many people have had a good result in DFS and then gave a ton of money back and away and never showed up again? There's when people win Millie Makers and give all the money back, because it's like they just don't. It was a good result. How they got there and process-wise, probably nothing to be able to repeat it and stick around and longevity and stay in the game and adapt and get better. So there's a lot of different things. So, you know
what though, there's actually a greater conversation to be had about Adam Scott. So I now that I'm looking more at some of his other data, like I understand at least where this thought came from. So let's take a look at the Farmers and the Genesis, for example. If you look at Data Golf's accuracy number, he lost 2% of fairways hit to the field at the Farmers and lost 1% at the Genesis. But he gained 1.1 and 0.94 strokes off the tee, and he was gaining 15 and 17 yards to the field. For example, 15 to 17 yards is going to be right around 0.4 strokes worth of distance gained, and he gained 1.1 and 0.94. So he gained more than half of his strokes in those two events with his accuracy off the tee, despite the fact that he hit fewer fairways than usual. What that should tell most people is that percentage of fairways hit or fairways gained is not a good representation of accuracy off the tee. It doesn't tell you how quality the misses were, doesn't tell you whether he was hitting his line very often, because a lot of the time, like if there's big trouble left, you're aimed down the right edge of the fairway. If you miss your line by 2 yards and you're in the rough, you just hit a super accurate drive. But the statistic that so many people use to measure accuracy doesn't know where you were aimed. Strokes gained off the tee does, and consequently our strokes gained driving accuracy does.
Yeah, these stats are way off too. Like using some old data or something like that. Like, you said it. He lost 0.8. You can just go on Data Golf. It's like free to check out. You can see it all. That's what the industry gold standard is for like sort of looking at this stuff. And minus 0.8 off the tee, and he still made the cut and got through. It wasn't like that's going to do much here for you, but just noting it, he still was there. And then before that, he had 0.94 at the Genesis, plus 1.1 at the Farmers, plus 1 at the American Express, plus 0.85, and then all the reasons you just broke down why it doesn't matter considering it. But when you say like the notes is like, his off the tee stats are horrible. And then the correction is, well, last event, that's my whole point. Like Toasty's playing really good right now. Last event, he came 30th. All right. We just broke it down for you. He's been horrible, but he was good here 2 years ago and he was good here last year. So it has to happen 12 months later in the exact same event this year. It's all randomized. Like it's such a small variance, small sample size and high variance.
And I will admit, like, yeah, he did not drive the ball well at the Players, but that's also one of the absolute hardest tests in the world off the tee. This is not even close to that. So, even if Scott wasn't accurate this week, even if he has a poor driving week, he's still not going to lose a lot of strokes off the tee because of his distance, and the approach play and the putting is good enough to still make him a good play. So even if you are of the mind that, his last week's struggle off the tee, or 2 weeks ago now at the Players, even if you are of the mind that is going to continue and he's not going to be accurate this week, that in and of itself is not enough where I think, number one, that it's worth not playing him, nor is it enough historically to make the field come off of him. So again, like, I'm still very confused as to why he's not a more popular play. I feel like it's just because of his age.
And in Price has a 9 in front of it, right? So it's like that's got to be part of it too. I think people just factor that in when you already have, like, again, we already named it with Minwoo and Goddard and Knapp and Nikolai and Kitayama and even Fowler. And people are going to like a little bit hotter right now that people are seeing, okay, looking good, coming in, needs a result, all that. Like, I just think people are so much more likely to land there. But again, we're always trying just to learn from each other and talk about it from the game. It's not really coming down on anyone. I'm just saying this is the prime point that I made earlier on the Toasty stuff. So I brought it up again with the Scott stuff. It's like, what is that? Like, if you're actually going to use data, then use it. Don't just use like last week or the week before and then not dig into it, because you like you said, the Players too off the tee can be water balls off the tee. It could be different things like that. Oh, someone lost approach at the Players. Yeah, go look. They went in the water 4 times in a row on 17. Russell Knox that year, whatever it was. Like, guess what? His approach didn't look very good there. But yeah, it's all relative. But that's like an excuse after the fact. When the result comes out at the end, you could say, oh, I knew Adam Scott wasn't going to be good because 2 weeks in a row I saw his off the tee was bad. All right, do it every week then. Take whatever magic thought that got you there and apply it and start winning at DFS every week, because it's not even applicable. It's just a thought. So we can dig into the granular all day, but just a little thing that way. Anything from the betting standpoint that you wanted to bring up? I think you brought up like Adam Scott at the Masters could be part of it if you want to go get that number now that we've talked through it so much. But anything else you want to bring up?
Not really. I don't have anything yet this week. I'm hoping to have some tonight where maybe I can say that I'm expecting, a stronger weather effect than the market is, and I can find an edge that way. But at the moment, I don't actually have anything for this week.
Yeah. I don't know, like I said, what sites these guys are using. They got me all going in on it. I only get on here once a week now, Alex, so I don't get as much camera time to go through it as what you're saying. But like, again, I just don't see how that's even possible when it's for 2026 specifically, when he was dialed for like every event but the players and a little bit off at the API. But also, you don't even need, like, here you can get away with a lot off the tee too. So it's all going to come down to more to me of like what else he can do with that stuff. But I'm sure if Adam Scott has a bad week, we'll see everybody back here next week saying that's terrible and told you so and all that, and who cares? But I just like to help people learn the perspective I think about it from, and then if that can help them apply it, then great. But all right, I got nothing else. I definitely don't have betting. Somebody asked for a first round leader pick earlier. I got nothing on that. So for me, let's talk about our lanes, and I'll go, but just because you may have the same, but you can put your spin on it and adapt it. But I definitely have noticed it, and I already liked it coming in. You and I talked a little bit about it pre-show, but I'm going to tie it in a different way. So I definitely think at least 2, if not 3 8K guys is going to be my lane for my main single entry, like what I'm going with this week and what we kind of relate it back to. In MME, I'll take on some more risk and different things. And across my portfolio, I'll cover more angles. But the reason I want to bring it up is because it's the guys in the 8K. I'm still fine with winning this thing. Like, I don't think the win equity spreads that far. Like, obviously I think Minwoo has the highest win equity, but what is it? 5%, 4%? Like I can look it up, but I'm saying like, that's just what they're giving him. I think you could spread that down the board even further. So I think there's that factor that the winner can come from the 8K range. So I'll try and spray more options in there that way. If I'm going that way, yes, I could end up on a bunch of guys that get, 20, 18, 15, 15, 12, 10, even like something like that could happen. But it's like you say, I always say it's not who you play, it's how you play them. In your case it's not just who you play, it's who you don't play. I wouldn't have a very high owned Minwoo. I wouldn't have a very high owned guy. And these guys could start my lineup, so I shouldn't say that, but just noting, I wouldn't have all of them I would have multiples of Minwoo, Knapp, Goddard, Kitayama, whoever else is up there with Fowler, etc. So I'm looking at it from that perspective, but also I think what I talked about earlier with like Yahtzee Scheffler on a Scotty week where you got to get the stuff right down below. I think playing 6K guys this week can work. Obviously, there's going to be a 6K guy that comes through and has a good week. There could even be multiples. But I think people forget that saying that and then figuring that out, or having enough lineups to even with 150 to figure that out. What if I put 50 and dedicate them towards that? It's still only 50 lineups in a very large field tournament, and you still have to take some stands and figure it out, this, that, and the other, or spread it out some if you want to just go spray and pray. But then now you only have like last week, if I had Lipsky in there for 2 or 3%, that's not very many lineups. So it's like what if they had the miscut in them or whatever? They're all dead anyway. So I think it's more challenging to figure that out. So I already like the 8K range. I think the winner can come from the 8K range. You can still play 9K guys with 8K guys and play multiples. So I'm fine with that. So I'm definitely going to be looking to play at least 2, if not 3 8K guys, and potentially 4, depending on how my lineup shake out for what my main actually ends up looking like. So yeah, heavy on the 8K range for 2 different reasons.
I like that. My leverage lane is going to be a bit of an answer to a question that was asked at like the very beginning of this show, which is, what do we do when the industry is all over one skill set? And my answer is, well, that's not the only skill set that matters. And this course fit model is very clear that yes, distance matters a ton this week. And the industry is 100% correct about that. But approach play also matters a ton. Putting also matters a ton. And so one of the ways that I'm going to look to be different this week and to try and find separators this week is guys who are not long off the tee, but they are great with their irons and they are great putters. And the I think really important point here is I was actually, I brought up this idea in my Discord, and one of my Discord members asked, I thought was a really great question. He's also a member at FTN, so he sees all the projections, the ownership, the GPP scores. And he said, if we already have the GPP scores, which already tell us who's under-owned and who isn't, does it really matter why they're under-owned? Does it matter if they're under-owned despite being a bomber, or if they're under-owned because they're not a bomber? And the answer is, yeah, it actually does matter, because just like we understand that every player has a range of outcomes in terms of what his performance is going to be and what his DraftKings scoring is going to be, every player also has a range of outcomes for what his ownership is going to be. And so when I say I want to find guys who are not long off the tee, but they are great with their irons and putting, one of the things that I'm saying there is, I know that this guy has some protection for his steam, right? We talked earlier about the fact that I think Burns and Brooks Koepka could both end up a lot more popular than their current ownership projection. Another guy like that, Wyndham Clark, has a very good GPP score for us right now, but he's a bomber. there's a very good chance that people who are looking in that range that you just talked about, that 8K range, saying, all right, I really want to hammer this range, but I want a bomber and I want someone who's not that high owned. There aren't many options. Wyndham Clark is one of the clearest options there. So if you open the DraftKings app and you see Wyndham Clark at 20%, you should be a little bit surprised, but you shouldn't be shocked. Whereas you're not going to see that on a, let's say like a Harris English, for example, or, there are some value plays who really are not bombers at all. They're great with their irons. They're great putters. There's no chance they're even going to be 5% owned. So that's the type of play that I'm going to lean into this week. And by the way, it doesn't mean that I'm not going to have bombers in my lineup. I absolutely will. But I'm also going to have probably, let's say, like 2 to 3 of these guys who are very clear separators, protected from an ownership perspective because they don't have the number one skill set that people are looking for, even though they're still very good fits for the course.
Yeah, that's perfect, man. I like that. And I think that's important for the people to take away is like, that's what we've talked about a ton on these shows and the concept of putting it all together, but still knowing the tournament that you're in and then applying it towards that and using things like wave stacking, even when there's not a wave advantage to your advantage, using a couple clear separators that fit in a range that people are talking about, but they're not being about where they're mentioning a bunch of these guys and they're all 8 to 12%, but nobody's clicking them. But then you've got 2 5%ers in there as well that fit the construction, but also not the quote unquote plays that people are on. And that stuff is way more important to me when I'm looking at the total roster construction or what the actual build I'm submitting looks like versus who are the plays that I'm on to get there with it. It's like, it's so little about that for me that it really doesn't matter. Like it's all going to be built based off of that. And then to your point of the like over and under on, we get that a lot too, because with the stone, people can see the optimal rate when we do our simulations to say, okay, this is how optimal this play is as a standalone, but it's how often they're showing up. And so that's thinking of everything as a whole within those rosters. So if you have Min Woo to be optimal 30% of the time and he's 28% owned, maybe he's not that bad. It's just, you're going to still have to think about it though, and how you're playing him. But if you have somebody who's 15% to be optimal and they're 32% owned, well, then you're probably looking at a bad play, because that's what, like the difference of like when people talk about like good chalk, bad chalk, anything can happen in a result, but that's probably bad chalk. I mean, he's optimal 15% of the time, but people are putting them in 30-something% of the time. That's a little bit over the top. How can I adjust for that? It doesn't just mean pivot to the next guy. It could be a different construction. It could be something that doesn't have that type of play in it, whatever it might be with course fit, skill set, wave advantage, all these different things can factor into your favor. So I think that was a good one, man, breaking it all down. If anybody has any follow-up questions for next week or any topics they want us to discuss, make sure to leave them in the comments at the end of the show once we're done, or if you're watching it on playback, you can do so already. Make sure to hit that thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. Alex, let the people know where they can find you. Anything else you got going on for the week?
At Alex Blickle 1 on Twitter. You can find all the FTN links and links to my Discord. And baseball starts tomorrow. And so, it's been an awesome season for Pick'em. And I keep kind of saying the same thing, but I think what people maybe don't quite understand about Pick'em is like, it's just such an awesome alternative to cash games where you just build a really nice bankroll from it. And I can't wait to, test our luck in the Pick'em streets there for baseball as well. So check it out if that kind of thing interests you.
Love MLB. I'm excited for that to be back. The thing I like about it is, like, again, I like NBA as well, but I know you and I have talked about this in the past. I know you've talked about it in your Discord and with other people as well. But like, when you get the projections dialed in and you're down to like this 2v2 or this 3v3 or whatever that looks like, and it's like also then having to stick around for all these different setups and all the, the late news and all the different stuff when it comes to, load management and tanking and all this gets a little bit much. I love baseball. The lineups come out early. It's fun building lineups. You can make anything look like an all-star lineup, but it's a lot of fun when you're actually building. And it reminds me of golf and football, which we talk about so often, of like the process can sometimes be more fun than the outcome. We love watching it. And when you get a sweat, there's nothing better. I can't say that, but I'm saying building the lineups and talking through the puzzle and figuring out, well, if this, then that, and the field's doing this. And then you're trying to adapt for that and playing these single entries where you kind of know, okay, the field's all in, like heavy, I should say, on the Yankees tonight. And that means this pitcher becomes popular. Well, I probably don't want to go against, I don't want the pitcher against the Yankees. I think they are likely to put up 6 runs, but if they only put up 6 runs and this other team does this, what can my roster look like that sort of competes with this? So I love baseball. I think that's important to remember. Our guy Aaron says, hope to see we'll have title. G Ryzen, Ham, and then we'll also have our guy Bellman, who's hopping on now with us as well and joined us in the off season for basketball. So we're gonna have a lot of MLB stuff rolling out. The Masters, the special is on, but the big thing I want to talk about quick, just before I get out of here, you guys can find me on X at ToeTagginTambo. I'm probably gonna put a new article. If I don't this week, I'll try and do it at least like every 2 weeks. It's something I want to just work on behind the scenes and then put it together in a nicer format. But just noting it, I did want to bring this up. This is a big deal. I don't think enough people know this, but if you are wanting to use SaberSim, you can only get all access at SaberSim. It's not a shot or a bad thing. It's just a note. You can only get starter or ultimate at SaberSim. So I'm going to start talking about this a lot more so that you guys know. The reason I bring that up is because if you're playing PGA DFS and you're like, well, I'd like SaberSim, but I don't need all access. I don't want to pay $100 a month or whatever it might be. You can get 79 or as little as 29 if you pay annually per month to include SaberSim on a single sport. If you're looking at baseball on a single sport, you can get $49 a month, including SaberSim, that you can't get single sport SaberSim. So it's a huge advantage. We do have the Winner's Circle program. If you guys haven't checked that out, just go to shipitnation.com, click Winner's Circle. The rules are all there, the logos, but we've got a ton of people win a ton of money and get their membership for free because of that, along with some other prizes. So hopefully this was helpful. You guys know where to find me on X at ToeTagginTambo. Hit me up if you have any questions or want to get in over at Ship It Nation. Alex, always a pleasure, man. Appreciate you hopping on to get through this with me. We had a good one here this week, and then we've got some really big events coming up. I think you guys have heard of it, the Masters in just 2 weeks. We'll still have the Valero Texas Open next week back at 10:30 a.m. Eastern. That's going to do it for this one, guys. For Alex and for myself, ToeTagginTambo, let's ship it.